Mary is here. Hail Mary of Banfield.
Hail Mary of Banfield.
We
Hail Mary of Banfield. Hail Mary of Banfield.
Hail Mary of Banfield.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. As requested, today we'll be exploring The Unholy, the 2021 supernatural horror directed by Evan Spiliotopoulos and produced by Sam Raimi, based on the 1983 novel Shrine by James Herbert. Starring Jeffrey Dean Morgan, William Sadler, Cricket Brown, Diogo Morgado, Katie Aselton and Cary Elwes, it follows an old town with a horrible history. When Gerry Fenn, a journalist with no integrity, stumbles upon the quiet town of Banfield, hoping to turn a bogus story into money, he comes upon a case unlike any other. A hearing-impaired girl is supposedly visited by the Virgin Mary, enabling her to speak and hear for the first time. As more people flock to Banfield to witness the amazing miracles that follow, both the Vatican and Gerry begin to wonder if the events are divine or sinister in nature.
When God builds a church, the devil builds a chapel next door.
The 1983 novel is an edgy thriller with themes revolving around Catholicism, demonic possession, witchcraft, religious fervor, and miracles. Each chapter begins with a quote from a famous literary work, often a fairy tale or poem dealing with folklore, from the works of Hans Christian Andersen, the Brothers Grimm, to excerpts from Peter Pan, among others. I'm not sure what Herbert's intention was with this fragmentation, but for me, it really did take me out of the progression of the story. Still, the third-person narrative moves through the points of view of all the principal characters, just like the film. James Herbert's ninth novel begins in the quaint British town of Banfield, a village with a dark history. The novel is basically about Alice Paget, a deaf-mute child that experiences a supernatural vision of a woman in shimmering white, claiming to be the Immaculate Conception. After witnessing the incredible vision, Alice finds she can hear and speak for the first time. The miracle is of course exploited by Gerry, a journalist that has fallen from grace for fabricating stories in the past. When news begins to spread to other towns, people begin flocking Banfield. This creates tension for the Paget family, with their parents Molly, a devout Catholic, and her father Len, an atheist, struggling to protect her. Aiding them is Father Hagen, the ill priest of St. Joseph's Church, who, while happy about Alice's revelations, is able to sense her spiritual disturbance. The ancient oak tree where the vision took place then becomes a shrine, a site of religious pilgrimage. The mass religious hysteria that envelops Banfield drives both the novel and the spiritual entity at the core of the story, pushing the beliefs and doubts of the main characters until the final crescendo. Those that were not religious find themselves turning to faith, while those that were already religious are also taught to be weary of religious delusion and false prophets. It's a fine tale by James Herbert, brought to life by Evan Spiliotopoulos in his feature film debut. While the essence of the novel is intact, along with the major beats, auxiliary characters are removed to improve pacing and structure. Setting up things to come, the film opens on February 31st, 1845 in Banfield, Massachusetts, through the perspective of a woman that has an iron mask closed around her head with a mallet. Although we're not told outright, the aspersion is that the woman about to be hung and burnt has been accused of witchcraft. At the same time, the local priest prays in Latin, announcing that in the name of Christ and Mary, Queen of Heaven, the woman's corrupt soul will be contained in a kern doll. Bold strategy. Perhaps a more durable object would suffice, but let's see if this pays off. Said to traditionally be used for good luck, the origins of kern dolls actually hail from pagan harvest festivals. The kern baby or harvest queen, typically composed of corn, was used to ensure the community had a good harvest, but with the town unable to stop what they believed to be demonic malevolence, they inverted its use, trying to contain what they thought was the devil or the Malefici, aka evildoer. According to the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft and Demonology, a compendium culled from the world's greatest historical libraries, inquisitions into heresy, witchcraft and demonology were very commonplace throughout our dark history. Before 1350, witchcraft primarily meant sorcery, a survival of common pagan superstitions. After that, we started to get more concrete definitions tied to the proliferation of Christianity, from Puritan preacher George Gifford proclaiming in 1587 that The witch is one that worketh by the devil, or by some devilish curious art, either hurting or healing, which the devil hath devised to entangle and ensnare men's souls withal unto damnation. Dutch Jesuit theologian Martin del Rio stating in 1599, "It is an art which by the power of contract entered into with the devil. Some wonders are wrought which pass the common understanding of man." To Edward Phillips, nephew of John Milton, proclaiming a century later that it was a certain evil art whereby with the assistance of the devil or evil spirits some wonders may be wrought which exceed the common apprehension of men. Far from being friendly to claims of divine visions and miracles, the compendium illustrates that in the thousands of investigations that spurned from these claims, few were ever recognized as legitimate, and most led to death. Both Herbert's novel and Evans' film essentially embrace these ancient definitions and explore what would happen if this took place in the present day, when the church had lost much of its power.
We are in an eternal battle between good and evil. Wherever God goes, the unholy follows.
As we pick up over 176 years later, struggling journalist and alcoholic Gerry Fenn is offered $150 from a small online publication to investigate cattle mutilations nearby. Complaining to his editor Max that he used to get paid $6,000 per story at the Examiner, he's advised to get his old job back. Of course, that's not so easy, with Gerry having essentially destroyed his reputation and career. Driving a few hours to Banfield, a town with a population of 2,688 people that was established in 1817, Gerry is disappointed to merely find a cow with the letter M spray painted on it. Despite its owner Mr. Geary believing it to be the work of a local Satanist group, Fenn is able to determine the farmer's 15-year-old son was actually just a huge fan of Metallica. Annoying Father Hagen for continuously bringing the pooping cow onto the church grounds, Mr. Geary is told to leave. After noting his employer wouldn't pay for a picture of the cow's behind, Gerry is lured to the ancient tree by a whispering voice. Finding the kerndoll used at the very beginning and taking it as an opportunity to make some quick cash, the journalist starts coming up with a new story.
When the ancient talisman was broken, mysterious cattle mutilations began.
You said broken.
Convincing the farmer to go along, he takes a photo of Mr. Geary near the doll, insinuating that the farmer was the one that found it. Recording himself narrate the story as he drove home drunk that night, he's forced to swerve out of the way of Alice Paget, a woman he finds standing in the middle of the road. Emerging from the car wreck and following Alice to the very tree he'd come from, he witnesses the girl praying out loud to a figure in the tree, pledging her soul to it. Collapsing when he touched her, the woman is carried to the church and taken to her uncle, Father Hagen, who calls the local doctor Natalie for help. Despite their concern, Natalie tells him that Alice appeared fine, leading them to speculate that she might have just been sleepwalking. And although Gerry tells Natalie he heard her speak to the tree, brushing it off, she explains that that wasn't possible as she'd never spoken before. Suffering from congenital cholesteatoma, Alice has never spoken or heard a sound in her life. Telling him he was lucky to have not hit her, considering his blood alcohol level, Natalie drives him to the only motel in town, reminding him how lucky he was not to be in jail. The following morning, we find Alice praying in front of a statue of the Virgin Mary, smiling as if she was being spoken to. Waking up the next day to realize that his car was in need of repairs and that someone else had beaten him to the punch with a story about weird cattle activity, Gerry comes up with an idea to write a new piece on Alice with a religious angle. Attending that day's mass, Gerry watches as Alice looks around, responding to something calling her name. The girl then leads the entire congregation to the tree, where we spot an elegant woman glowing in white that only she's able to see. With the reporter recording Alice and the responses of everyone around her, he catches the moment she talks once again, this time telling them that the lady has an urgent message for all of them and that she wanted them to come back tomorrow.
She says her name is Mary.
It's no surprise that with the test confirming she'd been miraculously cured, everyone starts to think that the Mary she was speaking of was the Virgin Mary herself. Seeing the potential for the story to reignite his career, Gerry calls his former co-worker Monica Slade, promising he had something he thought the Examiner would want, a divine healing. Reminded that his fabricated stories had nearly ruined the reputation of their paper and had actually cost people their jobs, he's told never to call back.
Next time you feel the urge to call me, don't.
Amidst the miracles and hope, intrinsically tied to the release of the spirit, Gerry begins to see visions, glimpses, and dark clues that hint to what is really going on. From visions of a figure crawling out of a red pond with furious intent, to the feeling that he's being watched and guided towards a particular goal. Gathering outside the church as Alice had requested the following day, they look on as a girl walks towards the tree and touches it, seeing a woman in white smiling back. Saying thank you, Alice approaches Toby Walsh, a crippled boy suffering from muscular dystrophy, and asks if he believed in miracles and had faith in Mary. When he tells her he did, he's summoned by Alice to then walk as Mary commands him to. What follows is another amazing miracle, with the boy standing up and using his legs, leaving the congregation and even Gerry shaken. A close-up of the statue of the Virgin Mary in the church gives us a moment of pause, however, with its eyes beginning to bleed, something only the audience is privy to. Much like the novel, the image is taken by Gerry, and his decision to open up an investigation puts Banfield on the map, with multiple news reports luring believers to town. There are basically three responses to the situation. We have the devout believers wanting to be close to divine intervention, flocking from all over the world to view Alice perform miracles. Those that want to exploit the events, like Gerry in the mainstream media, and people that have lived in Banfield all their lives that want to get out, with one resident noting,
"The Old Testament God is wrathful."
Giving us the papal response to the controversy, we're then introduced to Bishop Giles of the Boston Archdiocese and Monsignor Delgado, who's been sent by the Vatican to determine if the claims were real. Foreshadowing things to come, they point to three examples where people had claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary, followed by miracles and prophecies that led to the creation of shrines in Bosnia, Paris, and Portugal. All three locations now draw millions of faithful to them, and with people fleeing to Banfield in a similar manner, the church is determined to first confirm whether a miracle has actually been performed at all. Delgado notes that in the 18th century, Pope Benedict XIV had laid out a procedure to determine the veracity of a miracle. The illness must be incurable, the cure must be instantaneous, and the cure must be complete. In his capacity as Inquisitor, Delgado intends to use all medical science and technology available to disprove the alleged miracle and expose any deceit. If he fails, the miracle is to be considered genuine. In the meantime, the church will be installing a shelter over the site to protect it from the elements. Appearing at the press conference, Alice is confronted by multiple reporters taking jabs at her credibility, from asking if she'd received money to make the claims to whether she'd ever used drugs before. With Gerry calmly asking what the lady looked like, Alice smiles and tells him that she wore flowing white robes. Her glow is so extreme that she appears like the sun shimmering on a hazy day. Ignoring the others, she continues to answer Gerry, telling him that Mary first appeared to her 5 nights ago in the field, and that he was actually there to see it.
And what does Mary want?
Our faith.
Noting that Father Hagen was not feeling well, Bishop Giles and Monsignor Delgado meet with the reporter for an interview. When Gerry asks them how Alice is able to speak perfectly when she'd never heard any form of speech, Delgado is quick to explain that there are various degrees of deafness. In his mind, she may have been unconsciously hearing all along. Admitting that he was raised Catholic before lapsing, Gerry points out that his lack of faith could be an advantage. Having a neutral observer along to record the Inquisition would help avoid bias, but he's only willing to help if he had the exclusive opportunity to talk to Alice. Despite Delgado's protest, the bishop reluctantly agrees to the terms, noting Alice was already more inclined to talk to him, and that everyone deserved a second chance at redemption, including Gerry. Concerned about the unusual sway the new shrine had on his congregation, Father Hagen approaches the tree and finds the cairn door that Gerry had damaged. Revealing its presence to us, a tall, dark, cloaked figure with long fingers appears behind the tree, hovering menacingly before him. As the interview begins, Alice asks how many people would view this, and is told that it could range in the millions. Taking this on board, she tells Gerry that Mary wanted to reach as many people as possible. When asked how she planned on responding to people that don't believe her, Alice explains that seeing is believing. The girl then tells him that Mary chose her because Mary gave a voice to the voiceless. Alice had yearned to be healed, and she answered her call. Catching the reporter off guard, Alice then brings up facts about his life and failings, insights gained from Mary. Offering him a chance at receiving a divine award, Alice finally tells him to take the opportunity and spread her word. Interrupting them, Father Hagen excuses his niece and tells him that he does not want him or the others to take advantage of her.
Don't talk to me about God. You'd sell your soul for a story, and you know it.
Unlike the bishop who thinks a shrine would be great for Banfield, Hagen, who's suffering from emphysema and knows that his time is running out, is being very cautious. Quoting Martin Luther, he tells Gerry that when God builds a church, the devil builds a chapel next door. In his eyes, the world is locked inside an eternal battle between good and evil, and wherever God went, the unholy followed. This is why horrible things happen to all the people involved in the visions and miracles that led to the creation of a shrine. Regardless of whether what is happening to Alice is divine, he fears the end does not bode well for her.
miracles. They're strong acts of faith, and there is nothing that Satan likes more than to corrupt our faith.
Despite Alice healing Hagen of his illness when he collapses and has a heart attack right in front of Delgado and Gerry, the father was not wrong. Right after this miraculous event, the entity we saw earlier begins to haunt anyone investigating the case, frightening both Gerry and Father Hagen in terrifying apparitions. With his suspicion confirmed, the good father begins looking through the church archives, finding a book that was hidden in the walls, one detailing the life and wicked deeds of Mary Elnor, a woman convicted for performing miracles on behalf of the devil. Known as the Bride of Satan, Mary sold her soul to the devil for power and immortality. She then publicly performed miracles on the people of Banfield, deceiving them into believing she'd been chosen by the Virgin Mary as her vessel to perform divine blessings. In this manner, she could trick them into pledging their souls to her, thus condemning them to the fiery pits of hell. This tyranny expanded with Mary killing anyone that was either skeptical of these miracles or opposed to her in any way. Caught and tried by the people of Banfield, she was sentenced to death in 1845 and awakened once more when Gerry had released her from the Kerndoor. As a demonic spirit and witch empowered by Satan himself, Mary has a number of unique abilities. From miracle performing, the ability to heal the sick or injured so long as people believed in her, pyrokinesis, generating and manipulating fire at will, invisibility and intangibility, essentially the power to remain invisible and phase through solid matter, teleportation and voice mimicry, to spirit symbiosis, the power to use others to achieve her goals of damning souls to hell by worshipping evil. Mary is basically back in black and to her old ways, using her descendant Alice to subjugate not only Banfield, but anyone else that falls into her trap. This begins with the death of Father Hagen, the moment he finds out the truth about her past. Revealing herself to him in the confessional booth and listing some of her many crimes, Mary takes his life.
I healed you. Instead of faith, you repaid me with doubt.
Unfortunately, his death coincides with Bishop Giles blessing the tree and declaring it as an official shrine of the church. With more people coming to Banfield and praying to Mary, her malevolence and power continues to grow. At the same time, Gerry leverages the story to try and get an editor role at the Examiner, setting him back on track.
You want to talk to Alice? You have to go through me.
I'll get back to you.
I'm sure you will.
Sharing a drink with Natalie, he learns that although Kern babies were meant for good luck, it was believed that you could also trap bad things inside of them. As they venture for a walk outside, the pair are lured towards Pequot Creek, the place from his nightmare, signaling that Mary was watching and influencing them. With the report of finding Hagen's body in the church, the bishop pressures him to keep the apparent suicide out of the piece, fearing it would tarnish the divine occurrences and his congregation. It's clear the darkness has begun to take its hold. Refusing to believe that Hagen would kill himself and leave Alice alone, Gerry does what he should have done all along: investigative journalism. Of course, this puts him in the crossfire of Mary, with even Alice warning him that doubt weakens faith and leads to damnation. While this is true of doubting God, doubt in Mary actually does the opposite: strengthen your resolve while leading you to salvation. Teaming up with Natalie, Gerry uncovers the church records and makes the same discovery as Hagen, that Mary Elnor sold her soul to the devil for power and immortality. In the ultimate feat of deception, Satan would allow her and her descendants to perform miracles, prompting people to pledge themselves to her, and in turn, the devil.
Mary confessed to serving Satan as punishment. A mask was nailed onto Mary's face in the image of the Blessed Virgin.
Meanwhile, Alice announces to the church that Mary had spoken to her. Tonight is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and to celebrate, Mary wants them to hold a service at the shrine. What they don't realize is that this is essentially to channel their belief into power and condemn all of their souls to the eternal fires of hell. Narrowly avoiding an attack from Mary, the pair make it out into the light and seek the help of Delgado and Giles. Hinting that the bishop had begun to lose his way, we learn that he was aware of the history of Mary Elnor, but thought it wasn't connected to the miracles that were recently occurring. He even warns Gerry that any attempt to share his doubt would fall on deaf ears due to his tarnished reputation. With Gerry discovering that Alice was Mary Elnor's descendant, Mary breaks out of a statue and attacks him. Luckily, Delgado arrives in time to save him, driving the entity away with a crucifix and prayer. When Delgado warns them that those pledging themselves to Elnor during the Feast of the Immaculate Conception would be making her stronger, the trio attempt to perform a holy ritual in the church to stop this. The Monsignor notes that according to the satanic rites, Mary will perform a mockery of the Holy Trinity by calling on the faithful to pledge devotion 3 times. Upon the 3rd call, she would then take their souls and condemn them to an eternity in hell unless they do something about it. Unfortunately, before they can complete the holy ritual, the witch comes back for vengeance. Burning the giant cross behind them, the entity causes it to fall on top of Delgado, killing the last person she thought was capable of stopping her. And so, knowing that Mary was about to call on the congregation to pledge themselves, Gerry and Natalie gatecrash the ceremony. Realizing that the only way to stop Mary was to sow doubt, Gerry publicly states that the miracles are a lie he came up with to help his career and attributes the miracles to the placebo effect. At the same time, Natalie signs to Alice that Mary is devious and not to be trusted, causing the entity to threaten to silence Alice if she stopped the service. Realizing Mary's true nature was deceitful and wrathful, Alice confirms that the miracles were not of God or the true Virgin Mary. With her crowd dispersing, the spiteful Mary Elnor ultimately sets a tree and everything around her alight, before revealing her true form to Bishop Giles, Alice, and Gerry. Killing the bishop with her pyrokinesis, Mary then sets her sights on Gerry, who's saved by Alice sacrificing herself by getting in the way. With her only descendant now dead, Mary disappears as Gerry prays to God to bring Alice back to life. While he miraculously appears to listen, the girl returns unable to hear or speak like before. The people she had cured also returned to their prior state, indicating that everything was now well and back to normal. It's even hinted that Gerry would be applying for a job at the local paper. The main theme of the film is then reinforced by a warning from the biblical verse Matthew 7:15. Warning, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. At the same time, the film casts some doubt as to whether Mary had been defeated, with the statue of the Virgin Mary crying tears of blood again. After all, she would live for as long as Alice did.
Alice was your only descendant. You will never live again.
With that said, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that requested we explore the Unholy. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if there's anything else you'd like for me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
We both know that I'm not real good at this. Alice, she sacrificed herself for me. Let her live. Hey. You can't hear me? I have never said anything worth hearing my whole life.